when you're grafting a tree, you want to see where the energy is going in a tree. About me, this is my front yard in Fair Oaks. We moved here about 6 years ago. You know, permaculture was something I got into probably about 10 to 15 years ago. Was the first time I heard about it. And so, a big goal of mine was to buy a house with a big enough yard so that I could grow as much of my own food as possible. And so this is like a before and after picture of our front yard. There used to be a lawn, and now it's a thriving food forest. Same with the backyard. We've got chickens, rainwater harvesting, all sorts of cool stuff. So it's been really cool that Eric and Laura have put together this group, because I've kind of been waiting for something like this to happen, because permaculture is awesome. So yeah, let's jump into it. There's many different forms of propagation. These are the 5 that I'm going to talk about today. There's grafting, air layering, cuttings or clones, seedlings, and root division. There's also things like tip layering, like blackberries. You dip them over and put them in a pot and they'll root. And then there's tissue culture, which is a much more complicated subject. I don't know much about it, but if you're interested in things like that, I would encourage Googling it and looking more into it. So I'll start with grafting. So if you haven't grafted before, grafting consists of connecting a branch known as the scion to another plant or tree, which is referred to as a rootstock. This ensures that the tree will produce identical fruit to the donor tree that the scion was taken from, which is unlike growing from seed, which for the most part, they don't grow true to type. So for instance, if you were to eat an apple and you really liked it, and there was seeds inside and you sprouted those, it's very unlikely that you'll get a fruit similar to the one you ate. All species of trees have different variability in how true to type they are. So some things like loquats or cherimoyas or pawpaws, they might produce good fruit from seed, but a lot of things need to be grafted just to be sure that you'll have a good fruit. Another key thing with grafting is it speeds up the time it takes something to fruit. So if you were to, for instance, plant like an avocado seedling, it could take anywhere from 5 to 10 or more years to fruit, as opposed to if you were to graft it, it could take 2 to 5 years, which is almost half the time. And that kind of goes for most trees. Definitely speeds up the process of fruiting. Another thing is you can control the size of the overall tree. So if you want a citrus tree and you only want it to be 6 to 8 feet tall, you can use a dwarf rootstock, because the rootstock usually, which is the bottom part, the rootstock will control how big the top part gets. So if you have height restrictions, or if you want to grow in pots on the side of your house, it'd be wise to use like a dwarf rootstock just to keep the tree small. Also, rootstocks sometimes are selected for like disease and pest resistance. There's things like in Florida, mulberries are really sensitive to nematodes, so they use like a nematode resistant rootstock. And then there's like soil conditions and climate, so there's certain trees that, for instance, their roots can handle damp, cold, wet soil better than other ones. So if you have a climate that's really damp and wet, you'd want to try to get a rootstock that can handle that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So let's say I grew some peaches or apricots from seed, and now the seedlings are yay tall, and they're from the whatever stock it was that I had. Now those little trees that I now have 6 or 8 of them, and I wanted to have the same characteristics as they grew from.
As the fruit that it came from?
Right. Yeah.
If you want it to be identical, you'd have to graft. So you would take a branch from that tree that you liked the fruit from,
okay,
and you would graft it to those seedlings.
Because those seedlings are, even though they're from the seed that came from the same tree, I would graft a part of the tree that the seeds came from to the new little seedling?
So every seed that's sprouted is genetically different. It's just like every human that's born is genetically different. You might have the same mom and dad, and you'll have 8 children, and you'll see the variability. You'll see some that look more like the mom, some look like the dad, some are a mix. And so it's just how genetics are. No 2 humans are the same, and no 2 seeds are the same.
Or I could just...
Identical, at least. But some trees grow more true to type. True to type means that seedling will be similar to the fruit, and stone fruit is actually one that grows pretty similar to type. So like if you grew...
I know Henry peach.
Yeah, if you grew a seedling from that, you're going to get fruit that's pretty similar to O. Henry peach.
Okay.
Now, if you were to do that with apples, you'd have something completely vastly different, because there's such a high variability in that specific species of tree. So you kind of have to, if you're interested in stuff like that, I always Google stuff. I always say, are stone fruits true to type? And then you'll find that information. It's already out there. With every fruit tree, you can look that up. And so everything's going to be different.
Fruit tree you buy is grafted.
Yeah.
So you want to graft when the plant is pretty young, so the scion becomes the trunk, so you get that desirable fruit all over the place, not just one branch.
Yes and no, because I'll get to the last point I had was multi-grafted trees can spread out your harvest window over months instead of days, weeks. So let's say you have a peach that has, let's say this is a picture of a stone fruit rootstock that I bought at the Scion Exchange, and then this is like probably a Santa Rosa plum or a different plum that I got last year. And I really like plums and pluots, so I want that whole tree to be that, because I'll eat all of those. But you can take, so if you're going to eat a lot of one fruit, yes, I would graft it like this. If you want to have a spread out harvest, as the rootstock gets a little bigger, you can top it and it'll shoot out like 3 or 4 branches. And then you can graft each one of those with a different plum or a different pluot. And then the key one thing is you're going to have different fruit flavors, so you're not going to be just eating the same fruit all the time. Another thing is you can pick an early season plum, a mid-season, a late season. So instead of having this huge tree where all the plums are all done at once and you're like, I have to harvest all this fruit, you're giving it away, you're like, you can't even use it all. You can have smaller batches with different varieties, and you can spread that out. And I have a graphic a couple slides later that shows kind of that.
So where would you go if you wanted to find good rootstock that was nematode resistant or good for the local area in terms of being a good rootstock? Every
fruit's different, so I would first research what kind of negative things impact that type of tree. What are they prone to? It's things like loquats and apples and pears that get blight.
So get on Google and look for...
Try to just figure out what are the weaknesses of this species, and then you would look for, you would search, well, what is the rootstock that's resistant to that?
And then you have to try to find somebody that's got that rootstock.
Yeah, but some things aren't that, some things are just okay. Like with stone fruit, I just throw a seed in the ground. When it sprouts up, I'll graft it. You can't be too dogmatic about it, but at the same time, you should be knowledgeable about some areas you have worse problems than others. I'm not sure if there's a nematode issue in California, like in Florida, because over there they're very, very serious about it. But yeah, let's go to the next thing. These are supplies for grafting. So a lot of people will go on Amazon and they'll just buy grafting tape, which doesn't pull well. It's just a piece of plastic that's really thick. It's not really easy to work with. So this is parafilm. This is what I use. And it's you can pull on it and it stretches a lot. So you basically would wrap the sign with that. You would need some pruners to basically cut where you're gonna make the graft. A really good grafting knife, like this one, is pretty crucial because you're gonna split the stem of the rootstock and then you're gonna cut the other one. And this is a very sharp knife. And I've cut myself. I see people on Facebook all the time talking about cutting themselves with these knives, so be very careful. And then metal plant tags are crucial because if you use a Sharpie or a pen and write it on a white tag, that's gonna erase in less than a year. So metal plant tags are crucial. You can just scratch it in and it'll stay for years. This is kind of the cross-cut section of a stem on the left. And the main thing to take from these two images is the cambium layer. You can see on the image on the left, it shows you the green area that's just under the bark. That's this right here. So when you're grafting, the cambium layer from the scion and from the rootstock, they have to match up. Even if it's only on one side and not the other, see how this side is not really lined up? On this side it is. This is crucial for the graft to be successful because water and nutrients move through the cambium layer. So this scion will dry out and die if it's not connected at the cambium layer. And then there's a couple different grafts I'll go over. This is a cleft graft, which is like the most basic, easiest, simple graft. You can see on the left, there's the two with the red X. You can see the gap between the scion and the rootstock. It's not fully flush. And then you can see the ones that are flush. I've done grafts that aren't fully flush and they take, it just depends. Avocados are harder to graft, so you really got to get them to line up. Apples and stone fruit, in my experience, have been a lot easier. So it's not as important, but you definitely want it touching as much as you can. And then on the image on the right is like a apple tree graft that I did, and that's a year later after it's healed. So you can see that they start fusing together and become one. This is like a more complex graft that some trees that are harder to get successful grafts with, like pawpaws, maybe even avocados, other things like that. You can do this whip and tongue graft. It puts a little bit more pressure and it just has more surface area. It's a little bit more complicated to do though. All this stuff, by the way, I've learned on YouTube. So if there's any, like if you're trying to figure out how do I do a whip and tongue graft, you type that question into YouTube and there's guys that have been doing this longer than I've been alive that will show you exactly how to do these techniques.
Will you be sharing this?
Are you recording this?
Yeah, the presentation will be on our YouTube channel.
Cool. Yep. And then also, I posted my Instagram at the beginning, but if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on there. Let's see. This is a really cool technique. This is called top working or bark graft. So this could be done, let's say you have an old plum tree or an old apple tree or an old avocado tree and you moved into this property and you can't stand the fruit, but you've got this massive tree. You've got to think that their root zone underneath that tree is huge. It's usually as big as the canopy is. So that root zone is very valuable because you can basically chop the tree and then do bark grafting, where it's kind of like the same concept. You need to line up the cambium layers, but you can basically stump a tree down to this high and put 5 different varieties, graft them on, and all that energy from that root zone is pushing into these little tiny pieces now. And within a year or even 2 years, you'd be surprised these grafts will bounce back and grow huge.
If your fruit tree, let's say it's a stone fruit tree, and it has some kind of disease and the tree's not doing well and it's drying up and the leaves are falling off or whatever, can you do that to a tree that's got some kind of disease?
You can, but I wouldn't.
Yeah. Check it out.
It's just, it just depends on how bad the disease is, how far down it goes. You might be able to just cut the branches out that are diseased and get down low where it's good, but it just depends on what disease is. Like things like apples and pears and loquats, when they get blight, it's such a drastic thing. So yeah, this is I think the last graft I'll show. This is called a veneer graft. So on the image on the left, you can see that the rootstock is a lot thicker than the scion. So when you're doing the cleft graft, you want the grafts to really line up. This is a graft where, let's say you have a rootstock that's a lot thicker than the scion. You can make cuts in the side, and then you would cut the scion at the same area, and you can connect them. You would see on the image on the left in the middle, they've been connected, and then the next image right here is once this scion starts growing, you cut away the rootstock, and now all that energy goes into the scion that you want. And this is an example right here. This is the veneer graft. Now that this is actually taken and it's alive, this part can get cut out right here, and all this energy will now go to the graft that you want. Yes.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
How long does it usually take for you to tell that it worked?
So a lot of people, when the scion starts pushing a little bit of growth, people get excited because they think that it's working. The scions have stored energy in them. And sometimes it's like when you cut flowers and you stick them in a vase, they'll still bloom and flower for a little bit and then they die. It's like that last bit of energy. So sometimes your scions will start to push some growth, and that doesn't mean it's taken. Really, you need to have like the branch starting to grow out and like a set of like 2-3 leaves starting to come, and then you know that it's for sure taken.
The other question was how, when the rootstock is shooting branches out,
Everywhere.
just trim them down, how on top of trimming those off do you stay?
That's a good question. So anytime the rootstock starts shooting out suckers, you should be cutting them off. And certain trees shoot out more than others. It can be a pain in the butt. But that's really crucial in the energy growing to the scion, because you don't want the rootstock growing. A lot of times I'll walk by someone's house and I can see that they have a citrus tree and a sucker came up from below the graft and starts growing, and it's 2 to 3 times bigger than the grafted part. And a lot of people don't notice that. And that sucker takes all the energy, the fruit sucks, and the scion that you want the fruit from is kind of paying the price for that. So it's you always want to cut the suckers off.
Figure that out when you see the spines on that.
Oh yes. I'm surprised all the time though when I see trees taken over. I'll go in someone's yard and they're like, "Oh, there's my lemon tree," and I'm just like, "That's all rootstock. That's like 80% rootstock." And then you tell them, and they have a mental block. They don't want to cut it out because it's the entire tree almost, and the little small part is the grafted part. So you got to catch that stuff at the right time so that energy goes to the scion. This is the California Rare Fruit Growers Group. They do a Sacramento Scion Exchange like Eric was talking about. This is a picture from this year. The line was out the door this year. I went the previous 2 or 3 years. This last year was off the hook. It was insane. And basically there's these tables lined up throughout, and they have apples, peaches, mulberries, pears, and all of the bags on the table are basically full of cuttings of different varieties. And so you pay $5 to enter, and you can take as many different scions as you want. I think they want you to take 2 branches though.
I think it was 3.
3, okay. But like this is just some of the stuff I got this last year. It's very exciting if you're into fruit trees and grafting, because buying grafted trees of all these varieties, I mean, you're spending hundreds, thousands of dollars. You can go to the Scion Exchange and spend $5 and go home and graft all these things to your trees. And then I think this is the last graphic when it comes to grafting is, I just made this with ChatGPT. But this is just to show that if you had a tree with 2, 4, 6, 8, if you grafted these 8 varieties of stone fruit onto one tree, instead of only harvesting for a couple, maybe a week or 2, you're spreading out your harvest from early mid-May all the way to October, and so you're eating almost the entire year. And I mean, for instance, if you could do that with citrus and stone fruit, and you could have early, mid, and late seasons just with citrus and stone fruit, you could have fruit almost the entire year. And this is all stuff you can find on Google. You can Google Santa Rosa plum, when is it harvested? And you can start figuring out, before you go to Scion Exchange, you can say, okay, I'm gonna get these 5 scions that are early, mid, and late and graft them to your tree and spread out that harvest window. Does anybody have any questions about grafting?
You may get to this or not, but on the Dave Wilson nursery website, they make a recommendation, and it was the first time I had heard of it, if you're planting new trees, they're suggesting to plant, they call it a backyard orchard, planting, up to 4 rootstocks, 4 trees that they sell, and put them in the same hole. And
Interesting.
they go together and they bloom and they keep them small. You've got at least 4 to start with.
Yeah.
Had you heard of that, or?
I've never heard of that, no.
I hadn't either, and
It's at the horticultural center.
Bay Oaks.
yeah.
Bay Oaks horticultural.
Pardon me?
It's at the horticultural center right here, the library. They have a demonstration garden with it.
With that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
Cool.
It's not multiple like your example of 9.
Yeah.
You can start grafting on that later.
Totally.
But I thought that was really interesting for a guy like me who's going to do a new bunch of planting.
It helps a lot if you have a small space. You know what I mean? If you have acreage, then that doesn't really matter because you could just plant another tree.
Yeah.
So for small backyard
Space is
growers,
always important.
yeah, grafting's huge. Like in my yard, I have multiple grafts on almost all my trees.
Right.
So it gets
Anyway,
more varieties.
I thought I'd ask that.
Yeah.
Have you used the commercially available grafting tool where you basically you're punching out a little puzzle piece and you cut the one end on the rootstock and the other end on the scion and they kind of slide in like a puzzle piece?
It's basically like a set of pruners like this, and it has a V. And when you go and it does the perfect cut for you, but I don't like it. I don't.
Yeah, this
I don't
one
find
instead
it
of being a
effective.
V, it's a puzzle piece, so it kind
Okay.
of holds the scion in.
Yeah.
I got a pair, I just haven't tried them out yet.
I bought a pair and I threw it away.
Okay.
And
What didn't you like?
I like. I feel like that would work better if all the stems were the same size.
I would agree.
So when you're grafting, it's always different, and you're gonna have stems that are as big as a Sharpie. Some are as big, thinner than, it's just they're all different, varying sizes. So when you have one linear cut, it would work well if they're all the same size. I like this and this technique because I can do any different thickness. I have another friend who bought that also, and asked me, this was like a year after I bought it, and he asked me, he's like, "Oh, have you bought that?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I bought it. That thing sucks. I threw it away." And I was like, I had the same exact issue. So that's just my experience with it. If you're on a commercial scale though, and you need to go around grafting all these things, I'm sure that's better. You could go do that. Someone could come behind you and just make the grafts. But yeah.
And you're not going to talk about bud grafting, right?
No, that's another technique though that you can do, which I didn't put that in here, but bud grafting is like with citrus. You could take like just a little bud, which is in between the stem and the leaf. That's what's gonna grow, right? You could literally dissect this little part right here and then cut a little spot on the orange tree and connect that with this tiny little piece and it'll grow out. That's kind of, in my opinion, expert level grafting, but it's definitely something that works, especially good with citrus. Any other questions about grafting? Cool. So this is air layering, which is another really cool technique. You basically remove a ring of bark, you scratch the stem until the cambium is exposed, and then you wrap it with a plastic or some sort of like pot that you can buy on Amazon, like the one pictured here, with like potting soil or peat moss in it. And basically the roots will form, once that's closed, this roots will form here on the tree. So, when you're doing grafting, you'll find out you'll have either a good success rate or a bad success rate. You'll have some that don't take and some that do. Something like this, there's a very high success rate. The branch is not likely to die. It's still attached. You're gonna get roots, and then you can basically cut it once it's rooted. There's certain trees that don't graft easily, like lychee, longan. Those are 2 trees that they don't take to grafting very well. So most trees that you buy are gonna be air layered. And this is all so that you can get identical fruit to the tree that you like. Because like I said about the seeds, if you just try to grow all these things from seed, there's a lot of variability. So this is just another technique to get the exact same fruit. These are some more images. The one on the left, some people use aluminum foil. You can use plastic bags. there's many ways to do it, but basically the process is the same. Is taking off the bark, scratching it, covering it with some moist medium, and sealing it. And then these are some pictures of once they've rooted. And it's pretty cool because you can air layer a branch that's 5 feet long, and then once it's rooted, you can cut it, stick it in the ground, and you've got a 5 foot tall tree already that's ready to fruit in the next year, maybe 2 years.
And would you do the cut in the dormant season then?
For things like evergreens, you'd want to do it like early spring, late spring, when the frosts kind of have gone, when the sap is flowing and vegetative growth is starting to happen. I don't think with trees that go fully dormant, I'm not really sure. I'd probably still try to do it in the spring. I think this is definitely a better technique for evergreen trees though, especially kind of more subtropical stuff, like lychees, longans, ice cream beans. But it can work on lots of things. It could even work on tomatoes. You could have a huge tomato branch, and you could do an air layered tomato branch. So even annuals that grow, you can air layer branches. Any other questions about air layering? Another form of propagation that I do a lot is cuttings, or clones. The picture on the right is the passion fruit cuttings. I basically just took softwood cuttings, dipped them in a rooting hormone, put them in these plugs, and just left them under a little fluorescent light in my garage, and they all rooted. So that took like, I can't remember, I gotta look back on Facebook, I posted it, I think that was like day 10 from cloning. Passion fruit is a fast rooter. Very, very, very easy to clone, same with like grapes.
And you removed all the bottom leaves except for the top?
Usually remove most of the leaves, and you can leave a few on the top. The more leaves you leave on there, that plant has no roots. It's trying to keep all those leaves alive instead of focusing on root development. You don't want to remove most of the leaves. Some species do better as like softwood, like passion fruit. Some do better as hardwood, so like figs, mulberries. You want to get the pieces of branches that have turned like woody already. You don't want the fresh new growth. It just depends.
Why, like on mulberries, would you want the woody growth and not the fresh?
They just root better.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the scientific reason why, but
all woody, like stone fruit or?
not all trees can be rooted from cuttings. So that's another thing. Whenever I'm doing these things, planting something, researching something, I always input the question into Google, can I propagate mulberries from cuttings?
Okay.
And then can I do stone fruit? But then that's not always true, because you'll go on Facebook, I'm in like an avocado growers group, and most people would say you shouldn't propagate avocados from cuttings, but there's people in there that have done it successfully. But then the argument becomes about the root system, because a root system on a tree that's been propagated by cuttings is not as strong as a taproot from a seedling. Mm-hmm. That taproot is going to be the strongest, most vigorous tree. Okay. So time of year is crucial, dependent on what you're doing. You know, passion fruit should be in the spring. Mulberries need to be kind of when they're dormant. Rooting hormone is very important, so you can buy stuff at like Amazon or like a garden store that you dip the cutting in. You can make your own rooting hormones, and then always sanitizing scissors or knives. It's very important.
What do you use to sanitize?
I just use alcohol, rubbing alcohol. I do like 99% alcohol. So like if you're gonna make cuttings, you cut below a node, remove the leaves, dip it in rooting hormone, stick it in the moist, well-draining potting mix, and then around 70 to 80 degrees and 70 to 80% humidity with like indirect light, that should be successful. You don't want to be doing this in the summer, sticking this out in a pot out in the middle of the sun. It should be like under a shade cloth or indoors with like a fluorescent light. These cuttings are Mexican sunflowers. You can make homemade rooting hormones with willow, which is a tree that grows everywhere in the rivers and everything all through California. You collect the young growth, you cut them into small pieces like in this picture, you soak them in the water for 24 to 48 hours, you strain it, and then you can either dip your cuttings in it or you can just kind of let them sit in it overnight. And it has some natural rooting hormones in it in the willow, and it also has some like antifungal properties, which are crucial for rooting.
You let it dry out?
This is a liquid, so you would
Okay.
basically soak the cutting in it, like the part that you're gonna put under.
Okay.
But they also sell rooting hormones. If you don't want to do this, you could buy it on Amazon.
Yeah, I have.
Can you do a rooting on a sucker from like a ginkgo tree, not a fruit tree? And if you could, where would you cut it? Way down at the,
I'm not familiar with that tree. What is it?
a ginkgo tree? They're real common around here.
I'm not familiar with it. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
But it's a decorative tree, it's not,
Okay.
not a fruit tree.
I'm not familiar with those, so I would Google it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you everything's out there on that. I just kind of focus more on like fruit trees and
Yeah.
support species, nitrogen fixing stuff. But yeah, I just started growing willow because of this, so I can start making my own rooting hormone. These are some plants and trees that you can propagate from cuttings: dragon fruit, gummy berries, mulberries, figs, elderberries, pomegranate, grapes, passion fruit, moringa, Mexican sunflower. So yeah, you can make free plants as your plants are growing. And you can also turn that into a source of income. You can start selling these plants. This is something where, a lot of times you have to prune your trees and your plants anyway, so you could be turning those prunings, that trash, into more plants or a source of income. Another form of propagation is seedlings. So I kind of already talked about the true to type. Some seedlings don't grow identical. No two seedlings are the same. So there's some pros and cons to every form of propagation. It takes a lot longer to grow a seedling till it fruits. But some of the biggest pros on seedlings is the taproot, especially if you sprout that seedling in the ground, not in a pot. But that taproot, just growing straight down, never feeling the size of a pot, it just all out vigorous growth. I'm seeing in my yard some trees I bought that are root bound, grafted trees. They've been in pots for years. It slows down their growth cycle. You plant them and they kind of start to catch and grow. And then you've got seedlings that are just passing them up. And it's just because of that vigor from the taproot and just from being a seedling. If you're interested in getting seeds of just any type of fruit tree, you should check out Sheffields.com. You can buy almost any fruit tree you could think of, even the really rare stuff. Sheffield sells seeds for very cheap. You can buy just like an ounce of seeds or pounds of seeds for very cheap. This is one way I sprout like a lot of seeds. The image on the left, there's about over 50, maybe close to 100 seedlings that I sprout in one pot. This is a way to save space, and then I'll start to separate them, and then I'll get them out individually, and then pot them up once they've successfully germinated.
What are those?
These are pawpaws. So, yeah.
Do you, in this world of things, do they pay attention, I don't know if it's copyright or whatever, but I know like in the flower world, you can't necessarily propagate things without the license or whatever. Does that come up here too? Do we care?
Yeah.
Have you researched that?
That's a personal opinion.
Yeah, okay.
No, there's certain stone fruit, especially, that are like patented,
Okay.
and so I think it's more obviously it's patented, so you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
But I think it's more so directed for like commercial farmers.
Right.
So if they like catch you growing commercially, they're probably going to sue you and then make you pay them royalties or something for like how much you've grown and stuff. But for most things, the only thing I've really heard of is patented is really like the Zager, like stone fruit stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, there is some of those. But I mean, you go to the Scion Exchange and you see those scions at the exchange.
Yeah.
So
Because I was wondering,
It's,
like, how is this?
yeah,
Okay.
that's a
There's an apple that's, you have to buy the license if you want to grow it commercially, or I think if you want to sell it, like the fruit itself commercially, but yeah, it's a lot of it's just,
Under that
it's all
media
about a
cut.
commercial thing, yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna make money from it, they want their cut, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if you've seen the pink pineapples at the store. They don't have the top part, if you look, because that top part, you can grow a new one from it.
Yeah.
So they cut all of them off.
I wanted to grow cosmic crisp apples, but you can only grow them in Washington.
Oh, okay.
It's part of their, like you're saying.
Interesting. Those varieties get out because there's people that work at those places that, you know, take cuttings home and
Black markets.
stuff happens. Somehow it escapes. And then I think this is the last one I was going to talk about was like root division. So things that you can separate from roots would be like bananas, lemongrass, comfrey, sunchokes, turmeric, and ginger. This is a comfrey root right here. A piece that big will start a new plant. So this one comfrey root can create, 50 or more comfrey plants. Every year, if you start doing that, I mean, you're exponentially growing more and more plants. And in permaculture, that's what you want. This is a comfrey plant on the left. It's in my front yard. And then this is kind of like what their roots look like when you dig them up. They've got little new plants coming up here. But yeah, like I said, you can break this off into the whole long pieces. You can even cut them up smaller. I've got comfrey here that you guys can take. You could also buy just the root on eBay, and then you just throw it in the soil and it sprouts. Lemongrass is another really good one that, on the left is what a full plant looks like, and on the right, you can basically separate these little separate pieces and those all grow into a new lemongrass plant. These are bananas, one of my favorite things to grow. You can see on the left, that's basically an image of how a banana plant looks under the surface. It has a central root that's called a corm, and they're not very big, and the root system is pretty shallow and fibrous. It doesn't have a tap root, and so all the bananas come off that central piece. And on the right that's when I kind of cut it up into the multiple plants that I could make off that one clump.
Excuse me.
Yep.
For a banana plant, I was going to plant mine today. I have two. They're miniature bananas. I think one's called like no, it's not a pink lady, but it's a finger
Is it
banana.
called Goldfinger?
That's it.
Goldfinger. Yep.
And another one, and then there's another one. And again, it's a small plant.
Like this big?
Well, no, not, they're about this big.
Okay.
I just went to, with the Eldorado Hills garden group a few weeks ago to Morning Sun.
Farms
Okay.
Yeah, and I got in there.
in that room.
I didn't know what kind, should they go into cactus soil? I'm gonna put them in pots. I'm not gonna put them in the ground.
They like a lot of nutrients. So and they like to be wet.
Okay.
And they can handle moisture. They're from a very tropical, humid environment, so you can't really overwater a banana.
Okay.
And you can't over fertilize it either.
You
You cannot over fertilize a banana.
Okay.
A rich houseplant soil would work great.
Yeah.
A rich houseplant soil, nice and dark and for tropical plants, right? And then I got some special banana fertilizer, just like you said. Because Vince said you cannot feed them.
Yeah. There's some really good potting soils too that they use for cannabis because that's a high nutrient plant, and they sell them at hydroponic stores like Fox Farm, Roots Organic. Those are loaded with nutrients.
Fox Farm, I bought them before.
If you got some of that stuff, they would love it. That's usually what I use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll be all right in a pot for a couple of years, or?
I would get it in the ground as soon as you can.
Okay.
It'll grow faster. It'll be healthier. But just making sure that it has maybe shade cloth at first because the intense sun right now is pretty hot. If it's not used to that intense sun, it could
No, I have it in
fry
a
it.
shaded location.
Okay.
They're still in the pots I bought them. And so I was getting ready to plant them today, and I said, oh, well, I'm going to do that for last then.
Yeah, usually when I have them that size, I'll plant them and I'll just run a thing of shade cloth over it and just keep it watered, and it does good.
I'm concerned about frost mostly.
Yeah, the bananas will lose their leaves in the winter. The leaves will die, but the stem will stay alive and it'll just shoot new leaves out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't try to, you can't protect them from frost. Everything they'll melt.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's So this is a tool that a friend of mine made for getting banana pups out, because when they get big, they're a pain in the ass to pull out. Turn this volume off. There's a video of how it works. It's basically a big steel thing that you smash like that, and it really gets them out really easily. If you tried to do this with a shovel, it would take 10, 15 minutes and you'd be beat after just one. So this is a kind of a cool tool that I have for pulling them out. And then these are like, these are banana pups that are, it's hard to tell from the picture, but these are like 5, 6 feet tall banana plants. And yeah, you can put these straight into the ground and they just take off.
Do you prefer waiting until they're that size to separate?
Nope. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's back-breaking work to get those out, and they're extremely heavy because I don't know the percentage of bananas. I mean, they've got to be 70, 80% water. It's like full of water, really heavy. But they take off when you plant them from that size. So, yeah, that's it on the presentation I had. I think